Hi, everybody. It's March 5th, 2025, and it's Ash Wednesday. I'm in my happy place, McDonald's near me where I used to work. My little brother, Paul Kierans, and I used to come here every Saturday and sit and have an ice cream and watch Elvis videos on my smartphone. So I've been posting these videos as a form of therapy to deal with the trauma of watching Paul be locked up by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government for 588 days. And then I believe they killed him. So in August of 2022, I complained to the Burnaby RCMP when I discovered a fraudulent and forged power of attorney created by the BC government to give Paul the COVID-19 shot. I know it was a forgery. I know it was a fraud because Paul lacked the capacity to appoint a power of attorney, and the only word that he could write, his first name, Paul, was on the document, and it was forged. What I believe happened is they never took Paul to a lawyer. They never ever allowed him to speak with the lawyer. They had two of their low-level caregivers at the group home say that they witnessed his signature, but what they actually did is they guided his hand to make his signature appear more competent and capable than he actually was. When he does his signature, it's like with the letters all mixed up, upside down, backwards, missing. It never looks like what it did on this forged power of attorney. So as soon as the group home discovered that I had complained to the RCMP, I spoke with a constable at the Burnaby RCMP detachment, and I brought a copy of this forged and fraudulent power of attorney. She didn't even look at it. She said that she would subpoena, or she would get a search warrant for the original document, and she would interview the caregiver witnesses. She didn't do that. What she actually did is she just tipped off the group home that I had complained. And their lawyer, Tara Britnell, wrote me a letter, or actually wrote my sister. I have a nun sister that the power of attorney, a nun 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario. And she wrote the nun, or the nun's lawyers, and the nun. She wrote the nun and said, either you terminate Kathleen's visits with Paul permanently or he'll be evicted from L'Arche. He had lived in various L'Arche group homes, government group homes, for 30 years during the week. On weekends and holidays, my mother, and then after she died in 2004, my sisters and I cared for Paul on weekends and holidays. So on his vacations, we took turns. So I cared for 10 years. I had Paul at my home 1 or 2 weekends a month, and I took him to Newfoundland twice. So when the group home, when the government found out that I had complained to the police, they had the group home's lawyer write me a letter saying that I would never see my brother again, or write my sister a letter saying I would never see my brother again. Can you imagine? He was 64 and I was 66, and I get a letter from this evil, sadistic lawyer, Tara Britnell, saying you'll never see your brother again. So the reason I'm posting these videos is I'm just trying to convey the trauma of watching my little brother be locked up for 588 days We were allowed, eventually the Tara Britnell relented and she allowed us a 10-minute telephone call, not even a Zoom meeting. Because with the Zoom meeting, I could ask him, I could get a copy of his signature, or I could have him tested to show he was incapable of appointing a power of attorney. Like, this is how these evil, sadistic people think. So we were allowed a 10-minute telephone call, and Paul begged me for me to visit him. He didn't understand what was going on. He said, I'll work for you. He told me that he loved me, like every second word. He said, I love you, I love you. He didn't understand what was going on. And what I've done after Paul died, and I'll explain what happened that led to his death in a minute, but after he died, the evil nun applied to the court to have me declared a vexatious litigant. They said, well, I was struggling with the trauma of his death. They applied to have me declared. And she's had, the Catholic Church has paid for, I estimate, close to $1 million. Can you imagine trying to stand up to somebody who's willing to spend up to $1 million in legal fees? Like, what chance does anyone have? And I was a really good lawyer. I never lost a case at the Court of Appeal until I was disabled in 2008. Anyways, it was so painful to be separated from Paul and to worry about him. And they actually did allow in all of that time, in the 588 days, they allowed a one-hour visit on December 23rd of 2023 at the government, the new Democratic Party government office allowed Paul and I to visit for 1 hour. Can you imagine that? That's sadistic. It's cruel and it's torture. Human beings are meant to associate with each other, and suspending their right to associate is a breach of the Charter, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's a gross infringement. There was never, you must think, oh, well, there must have been some kind of medical report or some kind of evidence that it was in Paul's best interest not to associate with Kathleen or have visits with her. No. All there was so-called case notes from the group home that had created the fraudulent and forged power of attorney, which they produced after the fact, after terminating my visits. And the case notes were not even negative, but they were anonymous case notes. I was never allowed to cross-examine the person who did the case notes. Just torture. So everyone must think, oh, I did something wrong, or, I'm not perfect. I'm disabled, and I'm poor, and I've had a heart attack. I have really serious health issues, but I have a right to visit with my brother, and he had a right to visit with me. The judge who said I didn't have a right to visit with Paul, her name was Justice Sharma. I think her first name was Niki Sharma. And she said, Ms. Walker relies on some kind of right to visit with her brother. Since I've become disabled and stopped practicing law, the law in Canada has gone into the dumpster. It's a dumpster fire. Can you imagine a judge in the day and age of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms saying, I rely on some kind of right to visit my brother? Anyways, the main point that I want to convey is how painful it was. It was like a physical torture to not be able to visit my brother and to worry about him and to know that he was worried too. And then ultimately something happened to him on April 13th of 2024, after I had lost twice in Supreme Court and twice at the Court of Appeal and twice at the Supreme Court of Canada. Something happened to him on April 13th of 2024. He had a wound on the side of his head. After he had this incident, the nun's lawyer at the firm of Borden, Ladner, Gervais, Casey Deanshaw, wrote me an email and said Paul had a stroke and I could visit. I could arrange a 10-minute visit, or I could arrange a visit through him. So I raced to the hospital, and when Paul saw me, I said, "Paul, it's Kathleen," and he grabbed my hand and he squeezed it so tight he wouldn't let go. And then what I found out is that the nun had flown in from Ontario. It took her 2 days. They were going to wait and see if he died. They weren't going to tell me. They were hoping that he would die. And then just out of the blue, on April 21st of 2024, I got a phone call from the Burnaby RCMP saying they had been ordered by Ottawa to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. I was so excited. I thought, oh God, somebody's finally listening to me. And as soon as the nun found out I knew she was being investigated for the fraudulent and forged power of attorney, Paul had to die. And when I went back to visit him the next day on April 22nd, the nun said to me, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." She wouldn't look me in the eye. And I just felt so helpless. I just thought, oh, I should throw a chair through a window or do something. Because, I thought, I'm so close to getting his freedom. But his oxygen, she had ordered his oxygen mask removed. He was on a ventilator with an oxygen mask, and she had ordered that be removed. And she was ordered, I could see that he was being over-sedated, and I complained to the charge nurse. I said, "I think he's being over-sedated. Can you get a second opinion?" But what they did was they sedated him to death. And everybody that I've spoken to said they did medical assistance in dying on him. So in Canada, since Justin Trudeau came into power on October 19th of 2015, and with the Supreme Court of Canada decision saying that people don't need to be dying, that disabled people can be killed with what they call euthanasia. It's medical assistance in dying. And I keep on saying the word medical is from the Greek to heal. So there is nothing medical about killing somebody. But as soon as the nun knew that she was being investigated by the RCMP, Paul had to die, and he had to die fast. He was struggling to recover. I don't know if he would have recovered. He had I brought a book for him to read, and he grabbed a great big coffee table book, and he yanked it from my hands and turned the pages perfectly and scanned the pictures perfectly. He looked me in the eye perfectly. But once the nun found out she was being investigated by the RCMP, Paul was Exhibit A, and he had to die real quick. So she had his oxygen mask removed. I saw this with my own eyes. I saw my brother being killed before my own eyes. Can you imagine that? I'm a real human being. He's a real human being. And I saw the nun kill my brother before my eyes. They sedated him to death. So in Canada kills about 20 people a day and has killed more than 60,000 people since Justin Trudeau came into power in October of 2015. And you don't need to be dying. You don't need to have a reasonably foreseeable death. There's no judicial oversight or any oversight at all of these killings. There's no right to legal advice. There's no legal aid. All that happens is any two medical professionals, they don't need to know the patient. Any two medical professionals put their signature on a piece of paper, and the victim puts his signature on the piece of paper, and he can be killed. But even in Canada, Well, 5 out of every 100 deaths is caused by a doctor or nurse administering a lethal injection to the patient. And there's no judicial oversight at all. I mean, I come from a world where even to be divorced, every divorce took about a year, and the paperwork had to be scrutinized by the court registry staff, and every single divorce most of them would get bumped, and they had to be signed off by judges. But in Canada, they kill people who are suffering any kind of discomfort. They're offered death. We're not the best country in the world. We have fallen into a rabbit hole of evil, state-sponsored killing of our most vulnerable and mostly disabled and impoverished citizens. But that's what they did to Paul. And it's being investigated. My understanding is it's still being investigated by the College of Physicians. The doctor who was treating Paul put down on his death certificate that he had died a natural death, and that's what the coroner told me. But the College of Physicians and Surgeons assigned an investigator, and they're still in. He died on April 23rd. He was dead within 24 hours of the nun finding out that I knew that she was being investigated for the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. But the College of Physicians and Surgeons have assigned a special investigator, and he's still working on. And what I believe is that it was murder, that Paul was murdered. Even in Canada, they still cannot kill mentally incapable people. Children are mentally, if people are, and Paul had a court order specifying that he was mentally incapable. But the nun killed him, and the government killed him. And I'm just trying to convey what it feels like to watch your little brother be killed. And I beat myself up because I think, why didn't you throw a chair through a window? Why didn't you stop them? But there was nothing I could do. At that point, I'd been to the Supreme Court of Canada twice and been rejected. My goal in life was to protect my little brother, and from the time I was a 2-year-old girl, and in the end I wasn't able to do it. But the one thing that comforts me, the thing that I tell myself that comforts me, is that what the nun did was criminal. Her killing my brother was criminal. And if somebody's going to engage in criminal behavior, you can't beat yourself up if you weren't able to stop them. That's why it is called criminal. It's because its behavior is so bad that a reasonable, normal person cannot stop that person. Its conduct so egregious that you can't, it's by its nature. It's something that the society abhors. And Canada doesn't allow incapable people to be killed. And my little brother was killed right in front of me. It was like torture. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say for today. I'm still fighting to get justice for Paul. He just didn't deserve to be locked up for 588 days. In his retirement years, he never got a minute of peace. He died 5 days short of his 66th birthday. My little brother. Anyways, if there's anything that you can do, I had a GoFundMe account which I let lapse, but I'm going to try and get it going to reactivate it. If you can contribute to our GoFundMe account, or if you know anyone that can help us, I'd appreciate it. Take care, everybody.